They're being manipulated a lot of times by media. Media did tend to portray a different view where we as Christian Palestinians don't exist. I can tell you, John, you guys are the only and the first Western media to interview me on this topic. The mainstream media is not concerned about what happened to us, or somehow they don't want this type of story to go out, and I wonder why.
Hey, my friends. At LifeSite, we've been trying to give you the reality of what's going on in the Holy Land. There's a lot of disparate voices out there saying this is happening, that's happening, this is not happening. And how do we get to the truth of the matter? You've seen exclusive interviews with the auxiliary bishop of Jerusalem.
2 ladies were shot dead while they were moving within the compound of the church. In fact, one old lady of 70 years wanted to go to the restroom. She was shot by an Israeli sniper.
But I wanted to give you something of a scene of what's happening in family life. With us today on the John-Henry Westen Show is Khalil Sayegh. He's actually a member of a family that is in Gaza. His sister's there right now. His other sister was there and unfortunately was killed. And his other family members have been killed there as well. So we're going to find out from this Christian, from this Catholic in the Holy Land, what's actually happening in Gaza right now. You're going to want to stay tuned to this episode of the John-Henry Westen Show. Hey, my friends, I've got an incredibly exciting announcement that's going to change the way you experience LifeSite News. For far too long, life, faith, and family content has been sort of stuck in the dark corners of the internet, dealing with all the headaches of big tech censorship. But you know what? We are all about life, faith, family, and freedom, and that deserves the best viewing experience possible. So we're bringing it right to your home. Get ready for LSN TV, a groundbreaking app and streaming service that'll bring the best of LifeSite News direct to your fingertips and your favorite streaming platform. No more censorship holding us back. And best of all, it is absolutely free. Now, you can dive headfirst into all things LifeSite News, whether you're on the go or cozy at home with your smart TV. LSN TV isn't just another streaming app, it's your ticket to unfiltered, unbiased content that lines up with your values. With LSN TV, you'll get all of our breaking news, watch all of our shows, including Faith and Reason, Bishop Strickland, Mother Miriam, The John-Henry Westen Show, and more. Don't miss out on the hottest political updates from around the world, including the White House and Rome. Plus, we'll take you to faith-filled events like the March for Life, beautiful Eucharistic processions, the trucker protest, just to name a few. We've made it super easy for you to join the fun. LSN TV is up for grabs on both the Apple Store and Google Play. So whether you're Team iPhone or Android, we've got you covered. But that's not all. LSN TV isn't just for your phone. You can also stream our content on popular platforms like Roku, Fire, and Samsung Smart TV. Yep, we're everywhere you want us to be. So embrace the LSN TV revolution, where you get real news and real truth uncensored. Join our community of like-minded men and women who appreciate unbiased content and unrestricted access in a whole new and immersive way. So, ladies and gentlemen, what are you waiting for? Share the word, get excited, and become part of the movement. I'll catch you on LSN TV, where the best stories come to life. So downloading the app is super easy. All you have to do is go over to the App Store and then type in LSN TV and hit search. And then just download the app. Once downloaded, you should be able to open it and then enter your own email address. And that is all you need to do. Khalil, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
So let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. First of all, Khalil, let me say my condolences for the loss of your sister, of your dad as well. I want you to explain that to us, if you could first. What happened to your family?
Sure, John. Let me just start by saying quickly that although my mom is Catholic, I happen to be an Orthodox, and my father is an Orthodox. So I was born to a family that is half of it is Catholic and half of it is Orthodox. And matter of fact, we used to go to both of the parishes in Gaza. What has happened to my family started right after this war, although it goes back to a really longer history of being impacted by the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the terrible things that the Palestinians have suffered underneath the Israeli occupation, but in particular also the Christian community that have suffered since 48, since the establishment of the State of Israel, where a lot of Christian villages were completely destroyed, their churches were destroyed, forced out of their homes. But in this last episode of violence that started with the horrific October 7th attack that claimed the lives of innocent Israeli and Jewish victims, which was obviously carried by Hamas, an Islamist armed resistance to control Gaza. Following that, Israel has responded with tremendous violence. But the violence that Israel has chosen to respond with that did not discriminate between combatants or not combatants. It did not discriminate between even Christian or Muslim. All civilians seemed to be under fire, and they were under direct fire and under indirect fire, and I will explain what the difference between both. Under direct fire, like what happened at St. Porphyrius Church on October 19th, when the St. Porphyrius Church, one of the oldest churches in the world, was built in the 3rd century, where my family have been worshiping for years, was targeted, the Orthodox Church, when an Israeli airstrike that claimed the life of about 8 to 19 Christian members there, majority of whom were children. My friend Ramis lost the 3 of his kids in this bombing of the church. This made the death only at this church, John, was about 2% of the entire Christian population in Gaza. Again, we're a very small population that have been shrinking for years. But that's the broader context, what happened. That's the direct killing that the Israeli forces have carried against Christians by targeting churches. Also at the Catholic Church in Gaza, where my family was sheltering, Holy Family Catholic Church, 2 women were killed by Israeli snipers on December 19th. And when people tried to save them, young Christian Catholics risked their life trying to carry the bodies of these women who were shot. They were shot in the legs. 7 of those young men were shot in the legs. This is in the same area, by the way, that Israel killed its own Jewish hostages that were running in the street seeking help, carrying white flags. They were also shot at the same matter. Why? Because there were a very clear policy: shoot whoever you see in the street. That was a very clear policy that Israeli media has reported in, and they were critical of when they killed Jewish hostages themselves. 2 days after this, my father at the church, few days before Christmas, he gets sick. We don't know exactly what's happening to him because all hospitals in Gaza city were destroyed by the Israeli army. Ambulances are not allowed to treat people, including in the church. The Israeli tanks surrounding where my father is, and the majority of the Christians, and particularly the Catholics, are at that church, and ambulances weren't allowed. Rescue weren't allowed there. And all of a sudden, I hear from the father at the church that my father has passed away because he wasn't able to receive medical attention. He was not able to receive any type of care. But the story doesn't stop there. It goes even worse, because after months of trying to get my family out of Gaza, we decided to take the risk and to take the really dangerous trip between the north and the south of Gaza. We decided to do it when others have done it, when others have walked, and we feel that it was relatively safe. But what's so-called the safe road between the north of Gaza and the south of Gaza is a very dangerous area. It's a similar area to how World Central Kitchen aid workers were killed there by Israeli missiles. But they decided to walk. They went through the checkpoint. It seems that it was okay. But that day was a very hot day and was a very sunny day. And they didn't open the checkpoint until noon because they were celebrating Passover, or Pesach, as the Jewish brothers and sisters call it. And it seems like a combination of fear from the attacks that was surrounding my 18-year-old sister and the shooting that was happening, etc. She just collapsed. We don't know if it's from the sun. We don't know if it's from the fear. There's confusion for what happened. And she just collapsed. Totally healthy girl, young girl, my sister, 18 years old, collapses in this corridor. My mom, who's 55, shouts and asks people to help her, but no one would stop to help her, because if anyone stops and tried to carry someone there, he will be shot and killed by the Israeli army that was surrounding that area. She calls the ambulance and said, the ambulance says, we cannot get in. We cannot save your daughter. But only one of my Muslim friends, Muhammad, his name, and I want to mention his name because he's a hero for me. He answers my mom. And despite that the Israelis would shoot anyone who would get in that area, he risked his life with another 2 Muslim men and got in under Israeli shooting while shooting at them and found my mom has passed out, and my sister, he thought she passed out too, but it turns out that she passed away. And when they took me to the hospital, my mom was in a coma for 48 hours, and my sister, 18-year-old sister, had already passed out. But it gets even worse, because the separation and they moved to the south where there's no Christians or churches. My sister wasn't even able to get a dignified burial or have a prayer over her body and her soul. And she was buried in the south in a property that is owned by one of the Christian communities in Gaza, but without even a priest being there or anyone from the family.
Is this now typical of what's going on to the Christian community in Gaza? Is it sort of an exception for your family? It was targeted somehow, or is this general?
I don't think there is necessarily an attack on Christians in Gaza, Israelis. That's not the case. But I think there is an attack on general all civilians, Muslims and Christians. And the Christians happen to be there, thus they are being attacked. When you destroy all hospitals, John, in Gaza, including Christian hospitals, by the way, including the first hospital in Gaza, which is an Anglican hospital that was established in Gaza, including the Caritas clinic, which is a Catholic clinic that was run in Gaza, all shut down. One would wonder, well, who are you trying to target when you destroy all this health infrastructure? So that's the indirect killing of everyone, including the Christians. There were never any attempts to save the Christians. When you targeted the church, and Israel is very precise, it's one of the most precise army in the world, and in that region for sure. And when you target the church and when you kill people there, there's a very, very clear intention to target everyone who is civilians there, including the Christians. But when we say, like, how long have this been happening? It's not only in Gaza, John. Things have been happening also in the West Bank. I mean, the famous story of the Christian Catholic, actually, journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed about 2 years ago by an Israeli fire in Jenin, as she was reporting, and other cases of Christians who were killed during this conflict. But it's not only killing, it's the confiscation of lands. It's the imposition of regime permits that does not allow Christians to go and pray in the holy sites such as Bethlehem if they're from Ramallah, if they're from Gaza, and those who are in the West Bank are not allowed to go to Jerusalem to pray at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There's all sort of layers to this conflict and the imposition of this occupation that had made the life of the Christians in general and the Palestinians in particular very, very difficult.
Let's rewind for a second, just about the layout of the land. Most people in the West, we know the holy sites that we hear of from the Bible, but we don't know where they are in relation to where the conflict is happening now and what zones and what's permitted. Can you lay out some of that for us in terms of the Christian holy sites that we know of and explain where they are today and what that means in terms of occupation?
It's really, really difficult to explain it because Israel have created all sorts of layers and all sorts of segregated areas that are really very confusing to understand. Historically, it was that the entire land of what's known the Holy Land was controlled by Israel since 48, except what's so-called the West Bank, which happened to be historically what's called Judea and Samaria. And that includes Jerusalem, that includes the birthplace of Jesus, Bethlehem, and the Gaza Strip, the area which in the Bible known as the land of the Philistines in the Old Testament, or in the New Testament, it's mentioned when the Ethiopian prince was traveling, and then Philippus meets him, and he goes, it says that he was traveling through Gaza, and there that he was baptized, and that was a sort of a non-story in the Christian tradition. So that's how it used to be. In 67 war, when Israel conquered the West Bank and Gaza, it all became under their control. However, after the Oslo agreements in the 90s, it became more that the Palestinians have some sort of self-autonomy, which the Palestinian Authority control. However, they're surrounded by Israeli settlers and surrounded by settlements that they built in Palestinian land, including Christian land, like in Bethlehem. And they surrounded and they made some sort of bottlenecks that it's hard for you to get in and out. For example, if you're in Bethlehem and you're Christian, you can walk to Jerusalem. Like you could walk it's an hour walk and you can go to the Church of Holy Sepulchre. And according to the Israeli occupation, you have to go through a checkpoint and you need to have a specific permit that is very hard to get that permit. And majority of times their permits are denied. But if you're in Gaza, God forbid, as a Christian, It's almost impossible to get to the West Bank unless it's on Easter or Christmas and they give you a specific permit. But they make sure to separate the families and not to give all the families, which makes it an extra difficult for them to go there. And it created all sort of separation in families.
That's stunning. That's a piece that never gets explained. It's very complicated to explain, obviously, but thank you for that. So this has been going on since 48. Explain to us from a Palestinian perspective. Now, you are a Christian, but you're a Palestinian. So you have that background as well. What happened? How did this start? And why? I know we're talking about history and it should be known history, but you know what? For the most part, it's not. What is the Palestinian perspective on what happened in the beginning? How did all this start? And what did it do to the communities that were there?
When it comes to history, there is a lot of disagreements between scholars on what happened exactly and whether which side was right or wrong, right? But what I could tell you from a historical point of view, as Christians who believe also in facts, and who believe that there are such a thing as objective truth, and even in history, if you look really into objective truth, you can find it. And what I could tell you as an objective truth was that on 1948, on the creation of the State of Israel, more than 700,000 Palestinians were pushed out. Among those were the majority of the Christian community that lived historically in that area. They were pushed out just like Muslims. Now, the Israelis would say, well, they just left by themselves. Would say, okay, let's assume that's the case. Why they weren't allowed back by the Israelis? That's a question that they cannot answer. They would say, well, they just we had to just ban them from returning because we had to make the Jewish state a Jewish state. And if we're allowed Christians to come back or even Muslims to come back, it's no longer a Jewish majority. And I would respond, regardless of that, that's still an unjust and unfair to people. People like my grandparents who lived, from my mother's side, lived in Akko, the north of what's today Israel. And like from my father's side, who lived in Ashkelon, what's known as Ashkelon today, it used to be called Mashdod, lost not only their ability to go back to their home, but their private property was confiscated. It was confiscated completely. But not only that, some churches actually were damaged in 48. And then other things happened in 67 when Israel occupied what's known as the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights used to have flourishing Syrian Christian community. And they did not allow the Christians nor the Muslims to stay in the Golan Heights. They pushed them into Syria and they kept only the Druze community, a small religious community that had some sort of pact with the Israeli regime.
What do Palestinians see today as the solution to this? I mean, where do we go from here? Because right now, at least from some of the reports, we're seeing a lot of the north being bombed almost to oblivion. It looks like, there's so much rubble, it's ridiculous. What's the plan for right now? I mean, with so much being destroyed?
The Israelis have no plan. The Israelis seem to be interested in the annihilation of the Palestinian people. Doesn't mean that they will kill anyone. It doesn't mean that they will kill everyone, but it means that we'll create the conditions that is necessary for people to leave. I mean, think of it with me, John. If you live in Gaza and you're a Christian or a Muslim for that matter, and all the mosques were destroyed, all the hospitals are destroyed, the schools are destroyed, and even churches for that matters, why would you stay in Gaza? There's no reason left, and they're surrounding you, and they're not allowing food, and they're not allowing medicine, etc. The natural thing to do is the instinct of life is to follow life. We believe in that the life of the human is the most precious. Thus, people want to leave. The problem, though, that we're afraid that if we leave Gaza, that the same thing that happened in 1948 will happen again. That we will not be allowed back into our homes. That our homes will be confiscated, maybe, or destroyed, etc. And this has been already happening. 80% of the Christians in Gaza have lost their home already. That's an unprecedented number. So that's the fear. There is no plan. And the other issue is also on the Palestinian side, the Palestinians are divided. You've got Hamas, who tend to be more radical and they are more Islamist. And we as Christians do not believe in Islamism. We reject it. We don't think it's helpful. We don't believe in violent speed that targets civilians. We think it's unethical and immoral. And on the other side, you've got the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Liberation Organization would tend to have a support of different factions, but it's shrinking due to its commitment to peaceful means. Because when you have a Palestinian party that is committed for the last 20 years to peaceful means, and Israel is not working with them or meeting with them, the Palestinians look at it and they see that the peaceful means are not working, and they unfortunately turn toward unpeaceful means. That's something that for us as Christians, Although we understand why our Muslims brothers and sisters would feel the needs for violence, we still reject it, and we think that it's unethical. But we understand that there is also difference between fighting combatants people and then fighting civilians that is immoral.
About the lack of food and water. Now, this was cut off. I think earlier reports said it was cut off, but very few people know the extent of it. Are there people actually suffering from this right now? What are the conditions actually like?
Absolutely. I mean, at the very beginning of the war, it was very clear. The head of the Israeli army said it very clear: we'll cut the water, we'll cut the electricity, we'll cut the food. They will get nothing unless we get our hostages back. And he said, we're not fighting humans, we're fighting humans, animals. That's how he described the Palestinians, the most dehumanizing language that you could ever hear. I was shocked that this is someone who claims to be an alliance of the West, and he's saying this language, and that's a language that was used by different people, including Israeli president and others, and they were actually cutting off food. It reached a point that there were no food whatsoever in the north, that during Lent, John, when people were fasting, Catholics were fasting in Gaza, they were able to only eat what cans like of corn or whatever the Jordanians were throwing to them from the skies, because there were no fruits. And until now in the north, for example, there was no fruit whatsoever. And imagine going through Lent, where you're supposed to fast from all sort of animal-related products, and you're literally not eating vegetables and not having access to it. It was that case in the north of Gaza specifically for so long. Things have changed slightly, but not dramatically yet. After the horrendous crime of killing World Central Kitchen aid members, because then President Biden decided that he will push Israel. For the first time, he said, well, it cannot continue like this. You have to start allowing aid after they killed Canadian citizens, American citizens, and Australians as well. And then we start seeing more aid to the north, which shows you again that they could do it, but they refused to do it for so long. They have accepted the idea that civilians have to pay the price of the crimes that Hamas has committed in October 7th, and that is immoral, and that is very unbiblical as Christians and very unethical from our point of view.
What is your hope for Palestine? What's your hope for help from the West? What can we do?
I hope for peace, John. I really do hope for peace. I want to grow up in a Palestine that does not get bombed by Israel at any time, and nor do Palestinians have to go and attack by Israelis, soldiers or civilians. But at the same time, it cannot be that means the lack of violence. It does not mean that we don't have to have sea fighting. I believe in peace that does not have checkpoints, where me, as a Palestinian Christian, would be stopped at checkpoint and stripped or beaten up just for being a Palestinian. It happened to me more than 15 times as I was living in the West Bank after I moved from Gaza. That's the meaning of peace. I believe in peace when Muslims and Christians and Jews are equal under the law and not treated differently, and that there is discrimination against Muslims or that there is discrimination against Christians. That's what peace means to me. And to achieve that, we believe there are two ways. There is one way, which is to give the Palestinians their own state and 18% of their historical land, which is the West Bank and Gaza. That's a compromise. That's not something we're asking for pity from Israel to give us. That's our historical land. We're just demanding it back. Or if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just annex the entire land legally and give all Palestinians equal citizenship under the law. Give them Israeli citizenship. Let them vote. That's something that also Israel refuses to do, because guess what? It changes, quote unquote, the demography, and the Jewish state ceases to be a Jewish state. But these are the two options. And one of these options will lead us to peace. And Israel has to pick. And I say Israel, not because I'm blaming Israel more than Palestinians. We also have to pick. But I say Israel because they have the power. If they want to end this tomorrow, they have the power and the backing of the West to do it. And if they want to perpetuate violence, they have the power and the means to do it. And they are ought to do it. But here's the thing, John. Essentially, Israel is a client state for the US. No matter how we're trying to say to ourselves, Israel is powerful, Israel can do it by itself, etc., Israel cannot do it by itself, cannot continue doing this by itself if it did not have the backing of the West, in particular the US. And it breaks my heart to see the US supports this genocidal attack in Gaza. As someone who lives in the US, who loves his American friends, and who loves this country, truly, this is the only country in the world, and I'm not a citizen of the US yet, that gives me freedom, that gives me equality, that although I'm not a citizen in this country, when I walk on the street, I don't feel attacked for being who I am, when in my own country I was being attacked for being Christian, and I was being attacked for also being Palestinians by the Israeli Jews who live there and the army. So I really do love this country deeply. It breaks my heart to see the US supporting that. But you know what breaks my heart more? When I see self-proclaimed Christians supporting that. Self-proclaimed Christians who are supposed to care for me somehow believe that a secular state, or not secular or not secular, a state, a temporal state, is somehow part of God's divine plan, and that it's sort of the hand of God on this earth. And this state itself, since 48, destroyed churches, pushed out churches, and pushed out Christians. And somehow they believe that this is the act of God. Why would God push Christians out of the Holy Land? This is our land, and this is the Holy Land. Why would God push out these our people? But I know one thing. I don't really blame those Christians much, because I feel they are being manipulated. They are being manipulated by bad shepherds, obviously, pastors and what's so-called theologians, that they really don't have the understanding of the tradition of the church and how the church saw things historically. And they're being manipulated a lot of times by media. Media did tend to portray a different view where we as Christian Palestinians don't exist. I can tell you, John, you guys are the only and the first Western media to interview me on this topic, on what happened to my sister. And my tweet on the story got more than 3 million viewers. So everyone, every mainstream media have seen my story and understand what happened to me as a Palestinian Christian. But somehow the mainstream media is not concerned about what happened to us, or somehow they don't want this type of story to go out. And I wonder why. I truly wonder why.
Right now, we've got a Life Funder going for Jason Jones, his organization, Vulnerable People Project, and he's trying to help Christians and Palestinians leave the Gaza Strip where they're being threatened with their lives. And so if you go to the link in this video, you'll be able to see that and help Jason enact that. Khalil, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. God bless your family. We will pray for the repose of the soul of your deceased relatives and pray for your relatives who are still there.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on the show.
And God bless all of you. Let's all together pray for peace in the Holy Land, for Khalil, for his family, and for all of our brothers and sisters who are there suffering at this time. May God bless you. Hi, everyone. This is John-Henry Westen. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSite News. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.